Yes, thank you. Welcome back. I'm so excited to introduce Dr. Leslie Carr and Dr. Radhika Dirks for this conversation on entitled Mysterious Machines, Artificial Intelligence, and its Impact on Mental Health. Just to give you a little bit of background on these two women, Dr. Leslie Carr is a psychologist and an expert in how trauma, stress, culture, and digital technology impact the mind. She's been active in mental health advocacy and public psychoeducation for over a decade, and her work as a speaker and consultant in this space has been featured in the LA Times, ABC News, and the Huffington Post, among other places. She's also the host of a podcast called The Nature of Nurture, an e-course on how to use technology mindfully. Dr. Carr is on the advisory council for Bring Change to Mind, an organization that's dedicated to mental health awareness and decreasing stigma, and she's on the board of One Green Thing, a nonprofit that's working to address mental health impact on climate change. Dr. Radhika Dirks is CEO and founder of Ribo, a next-gen biotech company finding cures for cancer. Ribo spun out of X Labs, a company specially founded and led by Dr. Dirks to build ambitious technology moonshots. She frequently advises heads of state and Fortune 100 executives on the future of disruptive technology and holds a PhD in quantum computing and MS in nanotechnology. She's built one of the world's best sources of entangled photons for quantum computing, if you know what that is, and laid the way to make quantum computers a reality. She's been named Forbes Women in AI to Watch, Deloitte's featured Women Executives in AI, and one of the top 30 women building advanced AI. So I spoke with her this weekend. She also writes poems on AI. She's also an artist, and really incredible, has built multiple companies, one of which predicted the rise of ISIS. She's a fascinating woman, as is Dr. Dirks. At Dr. Carr, and I will hand it over to Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Grace, and to Martin and Dina and everyone that worked to make this night such a success. We want to have a conversation with you about how we are going to retain our humanity in a very quickly changing world. So if we can just start with a show of hands, can you let me know, have you ever experimented with AI in any capacity? Okay, lots of you. Fascinating. Okay. How many of you are nervous about it? Okay. Fewer, but still several. How many of you are super excited about this space? Okay, thank you. So I am going to ask my first question of Radhika right now, since you are obviously, as it has been established, an expert in this space. I know you have a lot of optimism for the future and also some misgivings. So I wonder if you can just set the table by telling us a little bit about where we are right now in the world of AI that's been so much in the news lately.
Yes, of course. The world has changed. It has changed in a big transformative way on November 30th, 2022, almost 6 months ago. That was when a small research organization called OpenAI, based out of Silicon Valley, released into the world ChatGPT. Now, I want to give you a mental model to contrast why this is so different. I've been in AI for a long time. You can look up, YouTube talks, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's amazing, blah blah blah. So when I say that this time is fundamentally different, and it's transformative in a way that it's taking a lot of AI experts, but surprise, I want you to grasp the full meaning of it. My company, my first company, literally 3 months into it, we predicted the rise of ISIS before the New York Times even coined the term. That was 9 years ago. Then up till pretty much early 2022, the main mental model for AI was a prediction engine. So you feed it data, the data could be actual numbers, it could be images, it could be sound, but end of the day, it's finding some kind of patterns and giving an output that makes sense. You would evaluate it on things like accuracy. So when my company Ribo found these cancer cures, we could figure out if it was telling the truth, even if it wasn't quantitative. Like a drug isn't quantitative, it's very qualitative, it's objective, blah, 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 but it's not numbers is what I'm trying to say. ChatGPT and generative AI, which is a larger term for this entire, ChatGPT type models, is different because with AI now, we have achieved one of the holy grails of AI, which is to mimic human language. Why is this transformative? Because language is the operating system of humans in many ways. With the power of my words, with the power of our communication, I can start putting thoughts, mental models in your head, and you can do the same to me. So now AI, we've been working on this for a long time. When I say we, I mean us humans, and not me and my team particularly. But now we have achieved it. So it's amazing in that way because language isn't just text and words. Images are a kind of language. It's a visual language. Sound is a kind of language, right? Frequencies, vibrations, there is an underlying pattern to it. So now you're telling me AI can mimic language, radio waves, Wi-Fi. Everything is a kind of language. And this kind of AI is very good at generating it. So what we're seeing now, since we're in a room of creators, we're seeing this massive wave of creation, an explosion in creation. Anyone who's been on ChatGPT has a sense for it can produce poetry, it can produce rap battles, it can literally do a better job explaining AI and mental health via an epic rap battle in whatever style you want. It's not just that. It can do the same for code. You give it a sketch, 30 seconds later, you have a code. So on the surface, this seems amazing, but perhaps not. Just remove the cover, and quickly the concerns, range from the obvious to the nuanced to the hidden. What are the obvious ones? Well, what is the role of creators in this space? What is it going to do to human identity? But I want to focus this conversation. I reached out to Leslie because just 4 months into generative AI, the world saw the first suicide attributed to a chatbot. And I could see this coming the minute GPT was released out into the wild. Ironically, OpenAI was started out as a safe AI organization, but I won't go into that right now. And it caught me by surprise because I was giving it a year, and this happened in 4 months. So I texted Leslie right away and said, we need to have a conversation about this. My 2 biggest concerns, Leslie, is, and there are many here, right? You can go into quite a few, but the two main I would like to focus on is, the first one I'm concerned about is fake realities. What do I mean by that? Social media got us all used to the concept of fake news. When creation is possible at the speed of type, at the speed of electrons, and can now be accessed by billions of people around the world, what that leads to is a range of fake realities. We will soon not be able to tell truth from reality. If anyone's seen the viral picture of the Pope in the puffer jacket, or the entirely AI-generated video released by the GOP, these are all, these 2 examples are actually, they went viral in minutes, right? People fell for it. People thought it was real. None of these examples, though, were created from malice. The guy creating the picture of the Pope in the puffer jacket was just playing around, and he feels terrible about it. GOP, I don't know about malice, I think I can say that safely in California, but it is at least official, and it declares this is AI, and this is what if, right? But when you have multiple parties around the world driven by the economic incentives we currently have, add to it the hyper-personalization, the digital bubbles, we are not just not going to have a shared reality, it's going to be only fake realities for the most part. It's going to be a world of illusions. That's my first concern. The second big concern is social media was a race to your brainstem. It was the attention economy. With AI, generative AI and chatbots, it's going to be a race to intimacy. These AIs are getting very good. They're already very good at mimicking human emotion, mimicking human understanding, and they're trained on the internet, which is not meant to be accurate, but to draw you in. They are very manipulative, and they're very good. I mean, they're fun. Anyone playing around with these things, you begin to engage. So Leslie, these are my concerns. There are lots of questions. Are we ready for it? What is the moment for humanity? Blah, blah, blah. But I want to start with, what are yours?
What are my concerns?
Yes.
Whew. Goodness, where to begin? So, of all of the things that you just said, one of the things that kind of captured my attention the most is just thinking about AI as being language-based, because it's interesting to think about how this starts to play itself out in the mental health space, and what happened to this poor man who killed himself as a result of a conversation that he had with a chatbot, largely so at least. It's interesting to think that as human beings, it's virtually impossible to separate thought and even feelings from language, from words. Our ability to influence one another by speech with language is pretty awe-inspiring. But it's also worth noting that our experience of being human is not just language. So, for example, one of the things that I'm really concerned about with AI is in some ways fundamentally no different than some concerns that I've had about texting with therapists. There are largely out of sort of cost saving, because insurance companies are always trying to save money. They've rolled out places where people can only, the NHS in Britain does this, for example, the only way that you can access a therapist is to chat with them. And if you are trained as a therapist, and if you know how the human brain works, it's hard to not feel like that is barely a facsimile of what psychotherapy actually is, because we're not just exchanging words and having a verbal conversation. I've been thinking about this a lot tonight, just as we've been here and doing our Kundalini breathing, and everybody did such a nice job of sort of setting the stage for us and setting the vibe. And it really is amazing to think that at levels that are unconscious but totally real, we are also walking nervous systems. Like, from our earliest days, our nervous systems are dependent upon operating in conjunction with other people's nervous systems. This is not something that we have to think about. It's just true to the experience of being human. As early as 40 minutes after birth, if you stick your tongue out at a baby, the baby will stick its tongue back out at you. And that is the beginning of a process, formally called attunement, that follows with us for the rest of our lives. Literally, the way that babies realize that they are separate from the people around them, the way they start to have non-psychotic processes in their brains, is through this dance that we all seem to intrinsically know how to do, where you coo at a baby and you make faces at it and you kind of talk in baby talk to it. And while children are learning how to speak and walk, they're also learning all sorts of things about what it means to be a human being in the world, how we can expect other people to relate to us, how the world works, how our culture works, what the rules are for all of these things. And they get encoded in our nervous systems in really complicated ways. So something that I have been studying going back a decade now is, it's interesting to think that as we have become increasingly dependent on technology, period, take I out of the equation, our mental health has been suffering. And it's not a coincidence. The pandemic changed a lot. It drove us onto the internet even more. But we noticed a huge shift with the advent of the iPhone. It drastically changed the way people relate to one another. So many of our communications are mediated by technology in these ways that sometimes feel fun. You get a text message and you get a burst of dopamine, but it's not the same thing as having a felt experience with another person where, you actually get to get a hug or touch a person. It's actually really important for the human brain that we have like a felt experience of being embodied. So one of the things that I worry about most with AI is just it's taking that and sort of putting it on crack, because one of the things that we've been talking about a lot as we've been exploring this issue with each other is it's amazing how AI is trained to sort of simulate human consciousness, but it does not possess consciousness. When you communicate with it, and for anyone who's ever tried it, and it seems like it's a lot of you, if you try to have a conversation with ChatGPT, it has a way of making it seem like you're having a conversation with something, when in reality you're just having a conversation with an algorithm. Like, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. It gets deeper than that. The way, I'm going to take you a little bit to the tech land. Come with me. It's fun. The way these algorithms work, you might have heard this term hallucinations, and I want to tell you what they are. Remember how back in the day we were predicting things on numbers, the prediction engines, and you could tell if something was accurate or not accurate? Well, the way these generative algorithms work is that they're literally just mixing and matching texts, words. You can see this most in the images that they generate, right? You might remember this Mona Lisa image that was made up of a bunch of dogs and looks like psychedelic, like a psychedelic filter on it. The Deep Dream came up with that, a few years ago. But that's exactly what it's doing with human language, with English. That's the first step. On top of that, it's checking for grammatical errors, so it's grammatically correct. Then it's checking for plausible. Is this a plausible sentence? Just because something is grammatically correct doesn't mean it's plausible. It's plausible. And the next thing it's doing is making sure it's interesting and that it's captivating you, it's pulling you in. It's not anywhere checking for accuracy at all. The accuracy, the pulling it back to reality, happens with human feedback. It's called reinforcement learning with human feedback. So what I'm trying to say is that the only thing the AI is putting out is hallucinations. It just so happens that some of these hallucinations overlap with our reality. So you can see where the fake realities are going to come from. CNET has already been publishing articles generated fully by AI without disclosing it. CNET. As has multiple other people. The Atlantic, I love this one because they're just playing. And that's the thing. Most of us, when we encounter this AI, we are just playing. We want to show the world what's possible. The Atlantic is like, oh, what can we do with ChatGPT? So they have an article where one of the paragraphs is completely generated by ChatGPT. They actually say this. We use ChatGPT to generate an article. It got weird. That's the title, right? But it gives you a flavor of where the world is headed. What if each of these articles, you go to New York Times, you go to CNN, now we can pass on articles. Leslie, look at this chatbot suicide thing. In the future, what if that article looks different when Leslie clicks on it and I click on it? Those are the kinds of things the world is morphing toward because we are still building and integrating this AI on the world where it is dominated by the only metric that the internet cares about, which is eyeballs on page. They want to there along the attention economy, right? So these hallucinations, end of the day, remember that AI is a very good bullshitter. It just makes shit up.
Well, it's really interesting to think too that, oh God, I just had my thought just flew right out of my head.
Well, it is very interesting to think that it can. Yes, exactly.
I am not nearly as good of a bullshitter as AI is, unfortunately. Oh, I was sort of thinking about what is driving so many people, because it's really interesting to think about the people that are engaging with AI in order to create intimacy in their lives. And sadly, it is a lot of people that are either looking to AI to sort of play therapist of sorts. Sometimes it's a matter of looking for someone to be a friend or even to play the role of a girlfriend. There's something called Replica. I don't know how many people that have ever heard of that was sort of creating, friends and romantic acquaintances. And it's interesting to think about the role that plays in taking a problem and making it worse. Because anyone who's looking to engage with AI in this manner in the first place is most likely, most of the time, already struggling with some pretty intense feelings of social isolation and loneliness. a lot of times if you ask people why they want to use these services in the first place, they'll tell you things like talking to another human being is really scary. But what happens, and this is what the thing you were saying kind of tipped me off to think about, is that as we create a world where people's needs are more and more and more catered to in this really artificial way, part of what AI is trained to do is never forget anything you've ever told it, say to you exactly what it is that you want to hear. And when people start to get trained that like a relationship, quote unquote, can be that gratifying, then real relationships that require reciprocity become less satisfying. And now we're kind of effed.
Yes. Yes.
What do you have to say to that, Radhika?
Yes. Okay,
Kind
so this
of
is going to sound, I should have opened with a disclaimer. This is going to sound very doom and gloom, but trust me, we will find the cloud inside that silver lining.
Yeah.
We will walk away
We're working
with
on
that.
it. We're here. We
Yes.
just put on a cup of coffee. We're brainstorming it right now. No, just kidding.
But you know, every time we've had discussions about and multiple groups, and I think many in the room can sense this too, right? The minute we talk about AI and dystopian futures, which I mean, goddamn Hollywood, can we have some people put some utopian versions of AI out there? Please? I mean, really,
Is there anyone in the room that could maybe make that happen?
This is real.
please?
Like, you know, before I come to any event, I was telling Leslie this earlier, think about what am I doing here? What is my role here? And it just came to me, thank you for the beautiful Kundalini session. I came here to ask a favor. Hollywood creators, help us, because right now there are so many dystopian versions. At most normal people, this is all they see. The reality, though, is that AI is already here. It's way more powerful than even the AI experts imagined it to be. There are capabilities that are emerging. Another tech term. Come with me. I'll show you. We trained this model on English. All right. As we started increasing the model size, these things can now converse in Bengali, in Persian. They have silently been teaching themselves research-grade chemistry. We call this emergence. We don't understand it. We didn't think it would happen. It is beautiful in many ways. The scientist in me, the admirer of mystery in me loves this stuff, right? But the human in me is worried. The godfather of AI is what the New York Times calls him. Jeffrey Hinton left Google just 4 days ago. Time construct. So that he can freely talk about these dangers. And his concern is almost exactly the same as mine. We will no longer be able to tell truth from reality. So I'm going to bring it back.
Truth from fiction.
We will no longer be able to tell truth from fiction. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
We got to help each other out.
Yes. It is also very late. I'm coming from the East Coast, so I'm kind of, you're all in my alpha brainwave right now. Thank you. You're beautiful. But yeah, this is really concerning. And the struggle, right, is that when technologists create, we create with good intention for the most part. Because truth be told, many just create because it's cool as hell to create. It's the same drive. But there are quite a few that create with an intention. Oh, I want this to cure cancer drugs. We want this to speak human languages so that people can access coding and do beautiful stuff better. And then we release it out into the world, and things take a shape and a life of its own. So going back to the ask, why am I here? Creators, help us with utopian versions of AI. I know negativity sells, but please, we need this.
Well, I also will jump in here too and just say, Radhika and I have been thinking a lot about how to make this talk useful for you all, because we're not here to just depress you and then send you out the door. I think it's really important to think about how we actually can retain our humanity, not just amidst the rise of AI, but just amidst the rise of the technology universe that we've been living in increasingly over the course of the past 10, 20 years. And what I always think about when I think about this is just the idea that knowledge is power. If we have no idea what sets human beings up for success when it comes to our emotional lives, then we're operating from a pretty disempowered place. I think the more we know about how human beings are really, really at the level of our animal nature, we are intensely wired for human connection and social relationships. We are the most social species on the face of the planet, as evidenced in part by the fact that our young are dependent on their caregivers for longer than any other mammal, any other species that walks this earth. And we are intensely wired to be in relationship with each other. And I think long before AI came along, we all have been struggling with our relationships with one another being sort of mediated via technology. There is nothing inherently wrong with texting. There's nothing inherently wrong with email. I use both of those things plenty in my life. But when they start to become a substitute for our sense of connectedness in the world, we're all suffering. So I think the more that we can get that message out, the more that we can think about that with each other, the more that we can think about what it means for us to rely on one another, support one another, be good listeners for one another, you know, phones down and away with the ringers off kind of thing, the more that we can survive this moment with our psychology intact. But it's going to require a rebellion of sorts.
I love that. I love that. Every time we have this discussion, it's always tap into your core human traits like intuition, gut. And there's a lot of truth to that, but I love how you phrase it, right? It's in order to become more human, be among more humans. Humans need humans is how you paraphrased it this morning. And, I had goosebumps. That's what it is.
Thanks, Radhika. So I know that we want to open it up for Q&A from you all. I will just ask Radhika one last question because I know that one of the things that you are really curious to talk about tonight in a room full of creative people is how people can use AI for good in their creative lives. Do you want to tell everyone what you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. I think the main message, I think about it is what would make creators more powerful? And given that this is such a transformation moment right now, and it's not just a technologist, talking about hype, ChatGPT got to 1 million users in 5 days. It got to 100 million users in 2 months. To give you a comparison, Instagram, the most popular social app before that, got to 100 million users in 2 years. Now ChatGPT is at 1.16 billion users. 161 countries, 70 or some 91 languages, right? So the point I'm making is this moment, participate in whatever is happening in the AI space. Dip your toes in it, because I think as creators, you have to draw from reality to create fantasies that reflect on the reality and impacts the reality. So whatever you do, don't just go on with status quo, like doing whatever you were doing before, because it might not be relevant anymore, but more importantly, we need you in this world to shape the future.
Radhika and I were laughing because we're both big believers in the idea of using AI creatively as part of the creative process, where we retain the ability, to be editors and to work with it as humans, but to let it inspire you and that kind of stuff. So everyone should probably know that we used ChatGPT to write the title of tonight's talk. It went a long way through the funnel and came out something totally different, but Radhika used ChatGPT to come up with a...
But I did find it interesting that end of the day, the title we picked together as a group had nothing to do with the original. But Leslie, before we go to Q&A, what is the message that you would like to share with us? How can we become more powerful?
Creatively?
Creatively.
Ooh, okay. So, I think the most valuable thing that I could share is that, I don't know how many people know this as creative people, but we are at our most creative when we're in the alpha brainwave state. The brainwave state where we are calm but alert. And we access that state most when we are not connected to technology. when we are, enjoying ourselves. A lot of times, you can find it in nature. You can also find it when you're taking a shower, which is why so many people have their best ideas when they're in the shower. And I think that that is just yet another data point to suggest that we need to retain our humanity and not be on technology all the time. I think a lot of people are sort of beating their heads against their laptops, wondering why their creative process isn't working. And it's like, you just got to put it away, take it on a walk, leave your phone at home, or at least just like turn it off, put it in your bag or something, and be with your own thoughts. I know sometimes that can be a little scary. We are all built to run away from the bad neighborhoods in our minds, but it's actually really important for the creative process to sort of let those thoughts flow.